Fall weddings have been a hot topic for the better part of the last 24 hours. Someone on social media walked into an absolute fire, and we're going to talk about it on this show today. Nick Brake and I, before we got on the air, like literally seconds before we got on the air, we're going back and forth about our takes on this. So we'll unpack that here in a matter of moments. But welcome into the Hard Count. It is Thursday, August 15th, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. And we probably have some fall weddings on the horizon. So if you are getting married in the near future, shouts to y'all. We hope you have a tremendous marriage. Hope you have a tremendous wedding. We will give our take on fall weddings here, like I said, in a matter of moments. Speaking of fall, though, we also got fall camp on and popping. We're going to take a visit out there to Gainesville, Florida, take a visit out there to Ann Arbor, Michigan, Knoxville, Tennessee. I believe they probably just wrapped up their scrimmage from this morning. So we will unpack the latest and greatest from all those individual locations as we get ready for the 2024 college football season. And it feels like we're home. Like it feels like it is finally appropriate for us to talk about week one and not just be wildly speculating and projecting and talking about what could happen. Like, I'm going to talk about actual expectations for the 2024 college football season in week one. We've talked about the season at large for a while now, but how about week one? We'll unpack that together. Also, we got a record prediction for you on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Peacock doing a little Hard Knocks kind of deal for the old folks out there in South Bend. I'm excited to see that. I love Hard Knocks. I've been calling for a while for us to get a college football version of Hard Knocks. What that looks like, TBD, but we're going to talk about the reality TV show that is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on the field. So we'll give you our take there for our record prediction. Also, going to talk a little bit about Florida State, because Florida State has been a talking point for the better part of the last, few months, in large part because we don't know what they're going to be. And not that we don't know how Mike Norvell is going to coach that outfit, not that we don't know who's going to be on the roster and the starting lineup for them, but we don't know how they're going to look. Like, they are 83rd in returning production in all of college football. Does that matter? What can we expect from the unproven production on that roster? Most notably at quarterback with DJ Uiagalelei. We spent the better part of the last few years learning that last name. I think it's going to be a name that we say a lot in a positive sense this upcoming fall. So we're glad to have y'all here, man. This is a show that is college football, exclusively college football, every single day of the year. So if you're just now finding this show, getting ready for college football season, like I said, welcome home. You're probably a college football sicko. We're a bunch of college football sickos over here, so subscribing to this channel is the best way for us to wrap our arms around you virtually and welcome you into this sicko college football community. If you're listening on podcast, we love you too. We appreciate y'all being dialed in. I put out a call to action on my socials, I guess in the last week, and I said, hey, if you got a birthday coming up, let us know. Like, we don't just call ourselves a community here just because it sounds nice and it plays well on social. Like, we genuinely mean, like, the people that listen to this show, we appreciate, we respect, and we love y'all being a part of this whole thing. So I have my man Talon hit me up today and say, hey, I heard you had a call to action on the show for birthdays. Mine's August 15th. So Talon, happy birthday. I believe Talon, from what I can tell, is a Tennessee Volunteer fan. So Talon, happy birthday. Again, if you have a birthday coming up, let me know the day and we'll do our best to get it on the calendar and to wish you a happy birthday accordingly. Quick note here too, if you use code JD1, get you a subscription to on3.com, $1 for the first month. I've said this many times. As we jump headfirst into college football season, intel, rumors, rumblings, all those things, that is going to be like at the top of our list in terms of what's on our mind throughout the week leading into Saturday. If you want to be as in the know as possible for your team, we're going to talk about Florida State, War Champ, best site in the industry. We're going to talk a lot about Nebraska, Husker Online, best site in the industry. Gators Online, best Florida site in the industry. If you want to be as in the know as possible, $1 when you use code JD1 gets you access to all those sites, all the insider information. Also, recruiting is popping right now. Got a big commitment from David Sanders coming up this weekend. If you want to be as in the know as possible from all the intel from a Steve Wiltfong and a Chad Simmons, for all the recruits and all the recruiting action, JD1, $1 for your first month. All right? So appreciate y'all being locked in, man. Let's get to some talk about week one for the beautiful thing that is the college football season. What can we expect? Because we say this a lot, like, expectations are a massive variable when it comes to determining happiness. So to achieve maximal happiness, there's a lot of things that we could say about that. But when it comes to week one, setting the proper expectations, I think, is probably the best place to start. And for Miami, the thing that I'm expecting from them and that blockbuster when they go to the Swamp is they are going to come out swinging. Like, this is not a situation, and we said this yesterday on the show, you cannot afford to kind of wade into the water and feel it out and see how you know things go in that first quarter and play conservative. Like, one, that's not what you brought Cam Ward to Miami for. You didn't go out and get one of the best quarterbacks in the transfer portal to have him hand the ball off 3 times in a row, call it 3 and out, and then punt it away. Though I think you need to run the football. That's why you got Damian Martinez, and I think that's who Mario Cristobal wants to be. But you brought Cam Ward in there to push the ball downfield. Last year, Miami wasn't bad throwing the ball downfield, but they were nowhere near what Shannon Dawson wants them to be. I think you got to trust the moves they made via the portal. I mean, they went out and got a Sam Brown. The way that they got Cam Ward, like the overall feel for me with Miami is they want to push the ball deep. And in a game against Florida, where I expect the Swamp to be absolutely on fire, like that is a spot where you got to swing early. Throw some haymakers. Because if you land a haymaker early, if you do what Utah did last year, now granted it was at home, if you can land a big play early and go deep the first play of the game, if that's the way that you want to get down, you draw first blood, it kind of levels the playing field a little bit and kind of turns down the major variable that is the Swamp. So I fully expect Miami to come out swinging in week one. Now for Florida, on the other side of that, I think they're going to look very put together. Because how have we talked about Billy Napier throughout the course of his last 2 years in Gainesville? There's been a lot of pushback, and a lot of it's been fair about their operation at Florida, the organization at Florida. They don't look totally like they're on the same page, and some of that's on the personnel, some of that's on the staff. But when you look up and down what Florida has at the leadership positions, I think they'll look very cohesive and look like a year 3 football team. You have a 6-year starting quarterback in Graham Mertz. You have a head coach going into his 3rd year at the school in Billy Napier. And this is the crucial one. You have a defensive coordinator in Austin Armstrong now who gets another year under his belt going into his 2nd year as the DC. And he has some oversight now with Ron Roberts kind of being his football father figure of sorts. Like, he's going to help oversee and kind of be the backstop for Austin Armstrong, to my understanding, with how things are going in Gainesville. So I think, honestly, we talk about Florida, we talk about this game against Miami. Like, I think that's going to be a major factor in this game. I think the fact that it's at home also will play to their favor in terms of operation and structure, and it's kind of being able to turn down the crowd noise when they need to, if you catch my drift there. And then also the fact that they've had a lot of people talking about them this offseason. Like, I think, we talked to Graham Mertz at SEC Media Days. I don't think it's so much a matter of they want to prove it because of all the external noise. I think they want to prove it to themselves. Like, I think there's a real edge internally, and I think they've been working hard behind closed doors, and they can't wait to put it together. So that game, Florida-Miami, is the game of week one, and those are my expectations for both those teams when it comes to what they're going to look like when toe meets leather. Now, LSU, they play USC on a Sunday in Las Vegas. And here's what I think we can expect when we talk about LSU. The defense may not be fixed. Okay, it may not be a defense where we talk about them at the end of the year being like a top 10 unit, and that's okay. That's all right. I know the folks in Baton Rouge are like, what do you mean that's okay? Not okay with us. I hear you, but I think you talk about week one, the thing that I'm expecting from them is a noticeable temperature change with how they play defense. And what I mean by that is, like, last year you watched LSU defensively, and man, it just, there wasn't that same sense of like aggression. There wasn't that same sense of pride, it looked like, in playing defense at LSU. And I don't know who you necessarily blame for that, but I do think that the coaching staff probably has a pretty large part in setting that temperature. Blake Baker now, if you watched his defenses at Missouri, they play with their hair on fire. They have the enforcer mentality, a stat we cite a lot when we talk about LSU's defense. Top 10 sack rate in America. What does that mean? It means they want to get after the quarterback. It means they're going to play with aggression. They're going to try and get after you for 4 quarters. And honestly, if I'm an LSU fan, in that first game of the season, if I just see that, I'm good. Like, if I see there is a noticeable mindset shift defensively, and we have that swagger back, that edge back, that pride back, like, okay, I can live with the results. Because Brian Kelly, I promise you, he is going to get the right personnel on defense. Whether they have it this year or not remains to be seen. Anytime you got Harold Perkins playing linebacker for you, you feel pretty good about your chances, but they're going to get the right guys on that side of the football eventually. If I know that the guy running the defense has the right mentality and attitude and that is permeating through that side of the football, okay, we can live with it. Like the standard at LSU is to get after you on defense. They'll do that this year. Again, may not be perfect, but they'll do that. Now, this is probably our most definitive take when it comes to expectations for week one, and it's around Georgia and Clemson. It's something you've heard me say before. Like, I just think Georgia's going to plant their flag in Atlanta in that game, man. I really do. Like, I think Georgia's going to come out there and just be dominant. And that's not to say anything of Clemson, because I actually think Clemson's going to be a really good football team this year. However, this game, to me, the way that it's trending, reminds me a lot of the trend when Georgia was getting ready to play Oregon. Like, we were kind of looking at both sides and sort of unpacking how Oregon could win the football game, and you sort of found yourself in a lot of ways, I think, trying to make a case for how Oregon could win the football game. I think that's the same thing going on right now with Clemson. The way that Clemson would win this game is, one, you have to fully pass the keys to Garrett Riley and let it be his offense. And then to take it a step further, you would have to catch Georgia slipping and have that defense play undisciplined on multiple crucial snaps. Y'all, that's not going to happen. It's not. And I'm not saying that Clemson won't score points. I'm not saying it won't be interesting at different points throughout the game, but I'm telling you, with how good this roster is at Georgia, with Carson Beck getting another year in the system at quarterback, with, I think, the overall attitude around that team having not won the national title last year, and for my money, being the best team in college football at different points, they're going to be out to prove a point. They're going to plant their flag as the number one team in America from week one, from the jump, noon kick in Atlanta. Michigan. And we're going to talk a little bit about Michigan here in a minute when it comes to like the intel we're hearing out of fall camp. I'm expecting them to play multiple quarterbacks against Fresno State. And that's not saying a ton because there's this quarterback battle going on, which, again, we're going to talk more about. But, like, we've seen this from Michigan before when J.J. McCarthy and Cade McNamara were going back and forth. My big thing with this is, like, even if you know who your quarterback's going to be throughout the course of the season, why would you not, one, at least check it with live bullets? Because it's one thing to be the guy in 11-on-11 during practice with a non-contact jersey on. It's a whole other thing to step out there and look these other 10 grown men in the eyes in the huddle and say, all right, here we go, follow me. Like, it's very different. It's a very different atmosphere, very different ask when you are the guy in a live bullet situation. So that's the first part of this. Let's, like, give ourselves one more variable for the coaching staff to make sure we know who the guy is. The second part of this is playing Fresno State week one would be great, but week two, Texas comes to town. And they're going to be watching that Fresno State tape. Why would you not give a little bit more mystery to that game plan? Why would you not play three quarterbacks? I think that makes too much sense. I'd be surprised if they don't play all three of them against Fresno State. Here's what I would say, though. Who you want to play at quarterback, I think, determines who you want to get the football to. Like, Alex Orji, I think it's been pretty well documented. Like, he's the best athlete they have at quarterback for sure, potentially on the team on the offensive side of the football. Like, I think they used him last year in kick return situations. Like, to be a quarterback, y'all, that's ridiculous, okay? So unless you feel wholeheartedly that you need to get the football to some of those receivers, Alex Orji's your guy. Now, if you feel like, hey, we really got to involve Samaj Morgan a lot into the game plan, or a Tyler Morris a lot into the game plan, or a Peyton O'Leary, which I think you very, very well could have that feeling around all those players, I think that'll dictate how they go about the starting quarterback position. But regardless, I think you'll see multiple guys play that first week of the season against Fresno State. So that's just kind of an appetizer for our week one take around some of those teams. One more for you, though. Here, I almost forgot before we move on here. Notre Dame, I think that offense will be substantially more explosive in week one. And we'll see what they connect like in week one in terms of like the vertical shots. But what we said about Miami is the same thing you say about Notre Dame. Like, trust the transfer portal moves. The portal moves are telling us who they want to be. They went out and got 3 wide receivers, guys that can burn on the outside. You went out and got a quarterback in Riley Leonard, one of the better guys in the transfer portal at the quarterback position. You went out and got the offensive coordinator, brought him back to South Bend, who operated the number one offense in all of college football last season, who averaged over 10 yards a pass last year. Like, they want to push the ball down the field. They want to run the football. That's absolutely true. But I would be wildly surprised if we see Notre Dame this first game of the season be a 55% kind of run team. I expect them to be more balanced. If anything, I think they'll lean more towards the passing game against Texas A&M. So obviously a lot of that is going to be determined by game flow and the rhythm and how Riley Leonard goes in that first half. But I'm just saying, I think Notre Dame will want to be more explosive and push the ball downfield that first week of the season. So that'll be fun, man. I'm excited for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Week 1, man, right around the corner. Fall is officially here. It's upon us. It's a beautiful thing. It's a very, very beautiful thing. So here's a hot topic that hit the internet yesterday. My man Fred took to Twitter. Also, full caveat here. Got a flag flying around the studio right now for those of y'all watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on podcast, don't worry about it. Fred mentioned in the thread to this tweet that he is a diehard college football fan, listens to Mac podcasts during the guy's a football guy. But he took to Twitter against the masses, and he said, "I cannot stand the, quote, no weddings during football season crowd anymore." He says, "Grow up, you're 26. I responded, "Fred, I'm 27. Thank you very much." And I think this is something that we all deal with to some degree. And it's become a very divisive topic. It's a topic where I don't know that there's always a middle ground to be had in this. Here's my take on this whole thing when it comes to fall weddings and college football season. I think if you are having the wedding, there is something to be said for knowing your audience. Now, if your people you're inviting aren't really college football fans, have it October 12th. Do what you do. Like there's no issue with that if you don't have people you're inviting that are college football fans. I'm all for it. I support it. However, I would say if you are having a wedding the third Saturday of October and you went to Tennessee, there's obviously going to be some pushback here. And here's what I would say. For those of y'all that are attending a wedding or have a wedding invitation, if you're not in the actual like wedding party, like you're not a groomsman, you're not a bridesmaid, I think you should feel some freedom here to make an honest decision about the invitation. Because speaking from experience, during my wedding, and we had our wedding in February, full transparency, during my wedding, outside of my groomsmen, I remember a handful of people that were at the wedding. Full transparency, you contemplate when you put the wedding together who you even want to invite. There are people where you're if they say no, it's okay. And so if you find yourself in a situation where you're maybe a fringe friend and you got the invite and you're kind of surprised you got the invite, I think you can feel freedom to say, hey, I actually have plans that day. Hey, actually, I'm not sure that I can make this happen. Because honestly, they may not have been 100% sure they wanted to invite you in the first place. And so Fred just walked right into the eye of the storm here. And I mean, it's a bold move by our guy, Fred. And I respect the confidence. I respect the fact that he had the gusto to speak his mind. Personally, we disagree. I would say if you're in the wedding party, again, tough decisions have to be made. If you have to be there, because there are situations where you have to be there, get the mobile device out, have the YouTube TV ready, be on when you got to be on. But as soon as the ceremony is over and there is sort of some free-for-all, feel freedom to enjoy that wedding how you want to enjoy that wedding. Okay, so that's my take on it right now. I think there should be much more margin and much less feeling of obligation around these things. Okay, again, know your audience. If you're in Knoxville, Tennessee, you're in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, you're in Eugene, Oregon, and you want to schedule your wedding for October 12th, more power to you. Just understand now the people you invite and how that may or may not be received. It's everyone has their right to make their own decision. So we'll leave it at that. But Fred, walking into the eye of storm, and God bless him for it. God bless him for it. Again, I'm 27, not 26. Okay. So fall camp is rolling. Fall weddings have been talked about, but let's talk about fall camp. If you want to stay up with all the intel, I'll say it one more time now. If you're on the fence, you're not sure, I don't know if I really want to get a subscription. It costs X amount of dollars. It costs $1 for 1 month using JD1. Okay, so if you want to be all the way dialed in, heading into week 1 of the college football season, just give it a try for a month. $1. You're gonna find $1 on the ground as soon as you walk out of your job at some point today. Like you're gonna find $1 laying around your house in the couch cushions. It's worth the investment. But if you have spent that $1 using JD1 for your first month, and you are all the way in the know with things going on over at volquest.com, you have all the scrimmage intel that's being posted over there from guys like Brent Hubbs and Austin Price and Eric Kane. I mean, it's an all-star cast over there. So let's go ahead and lock in. The latest I've heard from them, and latest I've heard from the folks close to Tennessee, is that they have been very cautious with their roster to try and protect their depth. And that makes a ton of sense. However, you talk about Nico, and that's the guy that I think everyone's most curious about. How's he doing during fall camp? Is he progressing how he's supposed to? And honestly, not a whole lot of buzz. And I think when you find a lack of buzz around your quarterback, the first thought is like, whoa, is something bad happening? Is he not performing? I would actually lean towards the opposite. I think with Nico Iamaleava, the expectations around him are so immeasurably high. If he wasn't meeting those, there would be some buzz. Like, to me, no news is good news when you talk about Nico. Sounds like he's handling business. Sounds like he's played well to this point. I can't wait to watch him actually play in a real game with without a non-contact jersey on his body. As we're showing you some of these highlights from practice, like, I can't wait to see what he is. Cannot wait to see what he is because he looked good in that game against Iowa. As he gets more comfortable in the system, which you expect him to be, now having spring and fall camp under his belt as the guy, I'm excited. I will say this too. We got to see him during spring practice, and when he was in the 11-on-11 settings and the 7-on-7 setting, every bit as advertised. Now, speaking of as advertised, they love their pass catcher group. Like, they love the tight ends, but I want to focus on the wide receivers. Dante Thornton is a guy that this time last year, everyone, including myself, was saying, like, hey, buy stock in this dude. He's 6'5", 214 pounds. Dude can absolutely roll. And he transferred in from Oregon last year with massive expectations, then got to the fall and had trouble putting it together, had trouble staying healthy. The report out of fall camp is like, hey, he's turned a corner. And when we saw him during spring practice, like, that dude is put together physically. Because you hear about these guys that are like 6'5", and you're like, oh, well, they must be sort of more slim, go up and get it kind of guys. Dante Thornton is a go up and get it kind of guy, but he is every bit of 214 pounds. Like, he was that they are taking care of him at the dining hall. I'll leave it at that. Now, Chris Brazzell is a transfer wide receiver from Tulane, also at 6'5", so you got some skyscrapers out there if you're a Tennessee Volunteer fan playing wide receiver. The report from him is that he's making a circus catch at practice pretty much every day. So you're going to have some options now if you're Nico when you drop back to pass. You got Dante Thornton. You got Chris Brazzell. Squirrel White, I feel like, is a known commodity at this point for the folks in Knoxville. Brew McCoy, they're being very cautious with him. What I was told is if they played a game tomorrow, he would start. He'd be ready to roll. So take everything that you hear about him, or maybe that you don't hear about him during fall camp, with a grain of salt. Obviously, coming off that injury, they're going to use him sparingly, but he's going to be ready to go, and he's been checking all the boxes. Now, defensively, I always take fall camp defensive reports and just what we're hearing around the defensive side of the football with a grain of salt, because to some degree, like, you're able to know what the opposing offense is doing because you're practiced against it every freaking day. But I'm doing some football math when we talk about what to expect from the Tennessee defense in 2024. And what I mean by that is, like, the equation in my mind is the cornerbacks, reportedly, are going to be pretty good. The safeties, still TBD, still kind of figuring that position group out. Defensive line, though, it's like they feel real good. They feel like they are 13 deep on the D-line. If there was one position group you absolutely have to have in the SEC, Vol fans know this, it's up front. And so to have that and to have it in spades, like, that is a very good sign. And so when we talk about the football math that I'm doing here, I'm like, okay, good plus really good, defense should be okay. Now, it's one thing to say that right now in fall camp, and it's another thing to have it translate to the actual season, but I think you can feel okay about where the defense stands. To take it a step further, using that football math, The thing that we keep hearing in the vibe out of Knoxville is like, hey, this offense should be a lot closer to 2022 with Hendon Hooker than it was to 2023 with Joe Milton, and to be fair, what Joe Milton had to work with. And so if we're going a lot closer to that 40 points a game number offensively, then we just need that defense to not be like 2022. We need that defense to be closer to 2023, where we're not giving up 290 yards through the air a game like we were in 2022. I don't think that's going to be the case for you. I think you'll be a lot better overall defensively than you were in 2022, and the offense should be a lot closer to that 2022 year. So we're using a lot of years there, throwing a lot around. Bottom line, offense sounding really good. Defense, I think they're going to be fine as well. Now, Florida. Now, get a membership to Gators Online as well. A lot of intel over there from Nick De La Torre and the team. Zach Albaverdi, like they are crushing all the coverage. So get locked in over there. Again, JD1, $1 for your first month. Graham Mertz looks like a 6-year quarterback. And that's always a good sign out of fall camp to have your guy that's a little bit longer in the tooth, seen a little bit more football, looking the part. And this time last year, he was still getting up to speed. He had spring practice, but the report is that last year he knew what to do and was learning what to do. Now it's going from learning what to do to learning why it all works. The next step for him is elevating his teammates. And one of his teammates that's extremely high profile is his backup quarterback in DJ Lagway. And DJ Lagway, 5-star cat, came into Florida with a ton of accolades, got spring football, tried to figure it out a little bit during spring, had a good spring game from what I saw. He is reportedly leaps and bounds better during fall camp than he was in the spring. So that's extremely encouraging. The thing with him is he's a big dude now. He's a physical specimen back there playing quarterback. He's also got the ability to make you miss. And that's not just something we saw in high school that we did see that. The thing with him is you're hearing teammates talk about his ability running the football. And if he can make you miss in a non-contact jersey when all you got to do is tag off on number 2, that excites me for the future with him. The main thing I want us to talk about with DJ Lagway, he is not going to be your starting quarterback if Florida is playing meaningful football games. Graham Mertz will be your guy for all 12 games unless something wildly unforeseen happens. However, the expectation is DJ Lagway will have a role in 2024. I do not see him redshirting. Also, if he is who you think he is, and Nick De La Torre and I talked about this a fair amount, if he is who you think he is, he's 3 years and gone to the league anyway. Right? Why would you redshirt him if he's only going to be there for 3 years to begin with? So he will have a role. What is that going to be? Remains to be seen. And some of that also is on DJ Lagway with how he progresses and what he looks like throughout fall camp and into the season and what he can handle during a game. I will say this, that game against Samford, you would hope to see a lot of number 2. All right, we'll leave it at that. Elsewhere on the offense, Trey Wilson, Eugene Wilson, whatever you want to call him, he's the best player on Florida's offense. I've been told he is, quote, unguardable. That's a nice thing to hear about your sophomore wide receiver who you're going to feed the football to. I mean, he is going to get a ton of touches. If you had a college football fantasy draft, I'd have a hard time not picking Eugene, Trey Wilson very early in that thing. I've heard that Billy Napier has said at different speaking engagements they are going to try and wear Trey Wilson out. Probably a good move with how effective he is when he touches the football. The comps that he keeps getting, the way they talk about him is very similar to how they talked about Ricky Pearsall out there in Gainesville. That's always a good sign, seeing as that was a first-round draft pick this past year. And it's not just Trey Wilson that gets you excited. Shamir Dike is a guy we've talked about on this show a lot, transfer wide receiver from Wisconsin, great chemistry with Graham Mertz. He just keeps PRing when it comes to the speed he's putting down in practice. Was clocked at 22 miles per hour during practice. Y'all, that's really fast. He's not just going to be a guy for you where it's maybe he should see the football now and then. I think he's going to be a very real option for you in this Florida offense. The encouraging thing if you're a Florida fan is, okay, you got Eugene Wilson, Shamir Dike obviously really coming on, but it's not just those two names. There's a lot of dudes that need to probably see the football, need to see the field at the wide receiver position. Aiden Mizell, real deal speed. Andy Jean, a lot of promise. Khalil Jackson. Elijah Badger, a guy who transferred in from Arizona State. There's a lot of dudes now where it's hey, they probably have to be involved some way, somehow. So to have the depth with the playmakers offensively to go with your experienced 6-year starting quarterback, I think that's going to pay massive dividends for them, especially early on in the year. Offensive line, Verdict's still out. The reason why I mentioned that is I just mentioned your 6-year quarterback. I mentioned all your weapons. Expect a lot of quick game here for Florida. Like, expect a lot of catch, 3-step, balls out on time. The luxury you have in calling quick game is you have a quarterback, again, in his 6th season, who can process the defense and know where it needs to go. That's massive. Graham Mertz, man. Very, very cool cucumber. Defensively, a couple of notes here. They feel real good about their defensive line depth. Even with some injuries, I think they're a lot better than they have been in the past. That's a price of admission in the SEC. To go with that, they feel like they're going to be a lot better of a team when it comes to tackling this season. That was something that kind of bit Florida in a few different spots a season ago. And the way that I'm processing that information, saying, okay, Florida's going to be better up front. They're going to be better when it comes to getting guys on the ground defensively. Like, how many times last year did we see Florida come a few plays away from winning a football game? Right? I mean, Missouri. Heck, 4th and 17. Folks in Gainesville are still having nightmares about that. The game against Arkansas. I know it didn't come down to a defensive play, but even so, you make a couple more plays on defense, maybe you don't even get to that situation. And so the point I'm trying to make here is I think those little things like defensive line depth, being better at tackling, that's going to add up to, I think, big things, and it's a big reason why I'm so high on Florida relative to the national narrative around the Gators. So far, so good. It's fall camp. Everyone's undefeated, but that's the latest out of Gainesville. Now, one more school to talk about here is the old Michigan Wolverines. Kind of funny, right? They are the defending national champs, and they have the 4th best odds to win the Big Ten. 4th best behind Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. And some of that's fair because they're 128th in returning production in all of college football. There's only 134 teams. The vibe in Ann Arbor is very, very similar to what it was a season ago. Now, different personnel, obviously, on the roster, different coaches on the staff, different head coach with Sharon Moore. But you go, check out all the intel over there at the Wolverine, the Michigan on 3 site, and all the guys that do tremendous work over there, from Chris Ballas to Clayton Safey to Anthony Broom. Like, they crush it. The vibe is very similar in the sense that, like, hey, the way that we did things last year that got us that national title trophy, the sentiment and the overall, like, way that we get down, the overall, like, heartbeat of this program is still the same thing. Leadership changes a little bit, yes, but it's still the same thing. I would also add in this. Michigan, I think, is always dangerous when they got the little chip on their shoulder. We've talked about it a lot. The returning production is one of the first things I said about Michigan during this segment, but, like, I think they're tired of that. I think they're tired of hearing about all that they lost last year, in large part because they still have some really talented dudes still on this roster. And it's hard to blame them if they feel annoyed by that. Like Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, Will Johnson, Donovan Edwards, Colston Level. They got, that's what, 5 NFL draft picks I just named? They're going to be in good shape from a personnel perspective. Now, defensively, they're going to be nasty. Wink Martindale, new DC, I think it'll be a very similar flavor to what you've seen from Michigan defenses over the course of the last few years. The names change. The guy calling the defense changes. I think the approach will stay relatively the same. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Michigan maybe be a touch more aggressive, just because that's kind of the Wink Martindale MO. They will have, I think, the best defensive tackle combo in America. That's not saying a whole lot. The thing with Michigan, and this is something we've said for a while now, is like there's going to be some names that come October nationally we're all very familiar with, but right now in August, like we never heard of this guy. Like I was talking to Clayton Safey getting ready for this segment and just kind of picking his brain on different things when it comes to Michigan, and he's dropping names like Jay Sean Barham, transfer from Maryland, linebacker. Said he's one of the hardest hitting dudes on the team. It's like I wasn't familiar with his game. My apologies. I wasn't really familiar with your game, Jay Sean. He's going to be a dude for him, I think. Zeke Berry, someone where if you watched the Michigan spring game, he was flying all over the place. I think he's going to be a stud for you this year playing safety. The name changes. The identity does not. Offensively, Tyler Morris is expected to be the go-to guy when it comes to targets at wide receiver. If you remember him from that Rose Bowl, he had a nice little catch over the middle from J.J. McCarthy, turned the corner, and it looked like the Alabama defenders had an angle on him, and then he just turned on the Jets. I mean, go watch it on YouTube if you haven't already. Like, he's a guy that probably needs to see the football in some way, shape, or form. He's going to be the go-to guy. Samaj Morgan also you saw with him a little bit last year. You saw Peyton O'Leary a little bit in that spring game. I expect him to have a good year. The quarterbacks, though, is really what's going to be the major talking point when you unpack what's going on at Michigan. And I'll say this, after the spring, even though we saw mostly the Davis Warren, Alex Orji back and forth, the Jack Tuttle train, yes, the Jack Tuttle train now was rolling during the summer. There was a point in time where there was some buzz around like, hey, Jack Tuttle looks like the guy right now at Michigan. Unfortunately for him, been a little bit limited during fall camp, so it swung back towards a Davis Warren, Alex Orji back and forth. Alex Orji, and Kirk Campbell said this, the offensive coordinator for Michigan, said this on a podcast over at the Wolverines. So again, JD1, $1 for your first month, get all the access to their content over there. He said, Alex Orji is one of our best 11 players offensively. He will have a role. And so you hear that and you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, I've seen him touch the football a few times and get jiggy with it. Like, yeah, he's a guy that probably needs to have the football in his hands. No way around it. However, you start to unpack that statement a little bit more, and maybe this wasn't what Kirk Campbell meant, but part of me is like, well, why do you qualify that? Why do you qualify that he's one of your best 11? Why not just say, yeah, he's a really good quarterback. He's probably going to be a guy for us. To me, qualifying that he's going to have a role in some way, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but in some way makes me think that Davis Warren, or maybe it's a Jack Tuttle, is going to be the guy for him at some point in time. Again, Davis Warren is potentially the best pure passer. The Jack Tuttle momentum from the summer, with him being limited right now, seems to have tailed off a bit. If I have to, deciphering, again, I'll say this again about Michigan. We said at the top of the show, deciphering what Michigan needs in 2024 at the quarterback position, I think is dictated by who do you need to get the football to. Do you feel like Tyler Morris needs to touch the ball 8 to 10 times a game? If you do, then you go with someone who's a little bit more of a pocket passer. If you feel like, hey, we can get it to him 4 or 5 times, maybe you get Samaj Morgan a touch here, a touch there, and if that's the case, then we're probably going to double down on the run game, be a little bit more diverse in how we call that, and then call it for Alex Orji in the read option, the quarterback design runs, whatever. There's a very good chance, I believe, that you will see a dual quarterback system for the first part of the year for Michigan. I think in a perfect world, you'd have one guy, and maybe that's the ultimate goal for them in November. But I'm just saying, I think it would make a lot of sense with how they talk about Alex Orji. And honestly, the buzz, it seems like, around this Michigan wide receiver room, which seems to have grown a little bit since the spring, I could see them going a two-quarterback system for the first few games. That game against Texas, you'd love to have somebody elevate and be the guy, but remains to be seen. So, overall, at Michigan, they hear all the talk. They do. And I'm very curious to see how that documentary impacts the chip on their shoulder. I think it'll be a very pro-Michigan documentary. The reason why I feel that way is because Connor Stalions is sitting for it. And I think Connor Stalions lives and breathes Michigan football, regardless if he's on that staff or not. He wouldn't do anything, I believe, to negatively impact that football program. So I don't think that's what the doc will be. But just saying, the more external noise grows around Michigan, like that game week 2 against Texas, if they drop that one and everyone just leaves them for dead, forget about Michigan, they're not who they used to be. We saw that happen to Bama too, fittingly against Texas actually. And then they went on a tear. So I'm not saying Michigan's last year's Alabama, but I am saying Jesse Simonton has him in his playoff, and I think he's onto something. So that's the latest out of Michigan. But as always, we'll keep you up to date with all things going on out there at the Wolverine and in Ann Arbor. All right, let's see if I can get this live on air, Nick. Oh, I missed it. Oh, well. Well, party of 3 in the studio today, I guess. Me, Nick, and the Fly. All right, so Florida State is going to look a little bit different than they did in 2023, in large part because they got a lot of new personnel. Quarterback's new. Keon Coleman's gone to the league. You lost Jared Fisk to the league. You lost, Jared Verse and Braden Fisk to the league. There's a lot of new pieces. 17 transfers into Florida State, 26 transfers out. I'll say it again, 83rd in returning production in all of college football. And so anytime you see that returning production number, for context, they were number 1 in returning production all of college football a season ago, it's fair to ask the question, how is this going to look? Like, how is this style going to look for them? We'll talk about it right now. Before we do that, though, Florida State fans, college football fans, period, make sure you are subscribed right here to the On3 YouTube channel. It's college football every single day. Want y'all a part of it. Want you a part of this college football sicko community. And the best way to do that is by making sure you are subscribed. So we appreciate y'all in advance for doing that. Let's start on the defensive side of the football, because I think that's the most straightforward. Yes, the faces change. Yes, the personnel changes. I'm telling you, man, the identity of who they are, similar to what we said about Michigan, that doesn't change. Like, I think that it's a less settled, less established roster overall, but I think it's just as talented. The way they talk about this team right now is like, this might be the most talented team Mike Norvell's ever had. And even though you lose a Jared Verse and a Braden Fisk, their calling card will still be the defensive line. Like, Patrick Payton will step up, I believe, in a massive way this season for the Noles. Marvin Jones Jr. transferring in from Georgia, former five-star cat, playing edge for you. Darrell Jackson, you didn't really get to see last year. Didn't really get to see him last year. Wasn't able to be on the field for him. This year, he will. They talk about him like they talk about aliens. Like, he's a different cat up front for them. You win games up front. You win games up front. And as much as they're breaking in new pieces, like Shaheem Brown's a guy that they're really excited about playing safety for them. He's not a new piece, but he's a guy they feel like is really elevating during fall camp. As much as you're breaking in new pieces and as much as they're like gelling defensively, let's be real, like, Florida State doesn't really need to be all the way on the same page defensively until October 5th when they play Clemson. Like, maybe the week before when you play SMU at SMU, you got to be on your P's and Q's with how good of a OC Rhett Lashley is and how good of a quarterback I think Preston Stone is out there for them in Dallas. But it might take a second for them to look like a dominant defense. They're going to have a really high floor outfit from the jump. You get that week 0 game against Georgia Tech. That'll be a good test, but I'm telling you, by the time you play Clemson October 5th and they come to see you in Tallahassee, like, Florida State will be ready. That defense will be back to their old ways. So the offense is really, I think, what takes up most of the oxygen, and deservedly so. Like, they are going to have a new quarterback in DJU, and that's been the main talking point. You lose a Johnny Wilson. You lose a Jaheim Bell. You lose a Keon Coleman. All guys that were massive, massive assets for you a season ago. However, with new personnel, I believe, comes a new scheme. And when I say scheme, that sounds like they're just totally changing the offense. I think what I mean by that more so is the approach. Like, Mike Norvell, I think with this offense, conservative is kind of an ugly word. I think they're just going to lean into their strengths. Like, look at what they have on this roster. Y'all, they're 3 deep at running back. Roydell Williams transferring in from Alabama, he can carry the mail. Keziah Holmes can carry the mail. All right, so they have dudes now in that room that they feel real good about. They feel great about the offensive line. And oh, by the way, you got a quarterback too in DJU who I've been saying for the better part of the last 2 years, like, let that dude run the football. That's a big body quarterback. You want to tackle him, who's like 230, 240? You want to tackle him on 4th and 1 on quarterback power? We get an extra blocker? I don't think so. So just because they may not put the ball in the air quite as much as they did a season ago doesn't mean they're not capable of doing that. I think football is a game where you want to get it to your best players. I think a lot of Florida State's best players are in that running back room. Now, with that being said, anytime you're able to run the football effectively, what you're trying to do is you're trying to say, hey, defense, you tired of getting beat yet? You're tired of having us to take a sledgehammer to your front 7? Add one more in there. See what happens. Looks like you have to because we're just running power, running inside zone, running counter, and you can't do anything about it. What are you going to do? When they do add that extra defender into the box, which will inevitably happen to try and stop Florida State's run game, that's when you count on the experience of DJU. That's when you count on the quarterback development from a Mike Norvell. We saw it with Jordan Travis. I think we'll see it with DJU. That's where you count on, in a perfect world, the radio in the helmet, benefiting DJU as well. That's where you go to a Kyle Morlock over the middle. That's where you go to a Malik Benson, another Bama transfer that Florida State got. So I think the difference for them will be, like, if you're watching it on television, like, aesthetically, it may not be 50-50 run to pass like it was last year. It might be a lot closer to 55 to 57% run. I think that's pretty realistic. However, Mike Norvell, even though he's an offensive guy, sometimes you have offensive coaches who are, like, very bent on playing their style of football. Hey, we want to get it out in space. We want to score 60. Like, Mike Norvell, I promise you, he'd be cool doing that. But I think Mike Norvell, over aesthetics and stats and how it looks, I think he's worried about winning. And I think winning football for Florida State in 2024 will be pound the freaking rock, DJ, you make the throws when you have to. Run the ball when we call it for you. And let's roll. Let's go win a lot of football games. That is going to be the formula. Play great defense, run the football, don't turn it over, and play clean. And I'll tell you this, I think in most scenarios that will be more than good enough for them to be really successful in 2024. So the Noles, they'll look different, new personnel, but like defensively, they're still going to be the bully on the block. Until somebody knocks them off, they are still going to be the bully on the block. And the fact they get that ramp up until October when they play Clemson and get a real good like roster talent test, they're going to be in good shape. And then offensively, take care of the football, punch him in the mouth, DJU, distribute the football. Mike Norvell, we've seen it now. We've seen it from him multiple times. When Jordan Travis went down, it was like, okay, well, let's take care of the football. Let's play good defense. Let's score 24. Let's get out of here with a win. Let's score, what was it? I mean, they were in the teens against Louisville. Got a third-string quarterback. Let's lean into what we do best. Let's go win the ACC. And so I think Mike Norvell has proven he is capable and willing to shapeshift. He's not one of these offensive gurus that's like, I got to throw the football downfield, otherwise I won't be able to sleep well at night. That's not him. He cares about W's. I think he could care less about points per game. So Florida State, they'll be fun to watch this year, man. New look Noles, but regardless, I think you'll kind of have that same vibe from them in terms of how they operate defensively. Now, Florida State, they got a date with the Notre Dame Fighting Irish later in the season. Peacock, by the looks of things, has it looks like a Hard Knocks kind of version of what they're doing at the college level with Notre Dame. I'm fired up for it. More college football content, I think, is always a good thing. But what's Notre Dame going to go in 2024? What's their record going to be? Year 3 for Marcus Freeman. Time to do something. And I don't say that in like a what have you done for me lately kind of way, but I think for Marcus Freeman, that's what he's telling his staff and his players too. Like, all right, we've been here for a minute now. Let's go do something. Like, we're not here just to win 9 games and call it a good season. Like, we want to go make the college football playoff and make some noise in the playoff. That's why we pushed the envelope, getting a Mike Denbrock, getting a Riley Leonard to play quarterback for us here, going and added, key portal pieces. And I think, like, when you look at what Marcus Freeman has done since getting to South Bend, recruiting has been tough when it comes closer to signing day in certain spots for them. It's just hard to hang on to recruits, quite frankly. But even so, man, I think he's done everything in his power to make Notre Dame what they expect to be, which is a national title contending kind of football team. Hasn't happened that way just yet, but I think that's what they're pushing towards. I think it's also very obvious when you look at Notre Dame, his fingerprints all over how they do things, all over it. Like, this is not the stuffy Notre Dame that you've come to expect at different points throughout this program's history. And stuffy is maybe the wrong word to use, but like old-fashioned, vintage, overly traditional, that's not them anymore. That's not. And I think the offense this year will reflect that. What I said earlier in the show, talking about week 1 expectations, I fully expect Notre Dame to open it the heck up offensively. I do. And we keep saying this, but like when teams make moves via the transfer portal, believe them. When they tell you, hey, we want to do more of this offensively, believe them. Notre Dame got one of the best quarterbacks in the portal. They got multiple wide receivers that have real deal speed. They got an offensive coordinator who averaged 10 yards a pass last year over from LSU. Like, they want to be explosive. They want to be high octane. And so with that being the case now, the pressure then falls squarely on your quarterback's shoulders. One, because you're the quarterback at freaking Notre Dame, so there's always some pressure there. But I think the pressure also falls on him because how they operate offensively will be very quarterback-centric. They're going to ask a lot of him, making good decisions and like that pseudo RPO triple option stuff they do, where Riley Leonard will read the dive key, essentially, the defensive end, pull it, he gets out on the perimeter, and he'll have a chance to either throw it out to that flat route or tuck it and run and get north and south. But that's just talking some ball there for you. But the bottom line here is they're going to ask a lot of him to make good decisions. And then on top of that, when there's money on the table, cash in. Cash in, because as much as they're going to want to push the football deep, they're also going to be able to throw the football deep because of what they're going to do in the run game. Like LSU last year with Mike Denbrock calling the shots and that really good offense last year, one of the best yards per carry teams in America. So they're going to run to throw. I believe that. And how Riley Leonard handles that will be massive. Will be absolutely massive. Now, defensively, Marcus Freeman's the head coach. He comes from the defensive side of the football. As long as he's the head coach, that defense will be there. pretty straightforward. Like, there's not a lot of analysis baked into that besides the fact that you have, I believe, one of the best secondaries in America. Like, probably right behind Ohio State. You got Ben Morrison, Xavier Watts. You got some dudes now. And the way that Marcus Freeman operates, it's in his DNA. That Irish defense will be ready to roll. Make no mistake about it. So let's go game by game here and just kind of predict what we see the Irish doing here in 2024. First game of the year, College game day, College Station, at A&M. If you want to be who you say you're going to be, you win this game. There's no way around it. Hostile environment, first-year head coach on the other side at a new place at A&M, and Mike Elko, coming over from what he did at Duke. Riley Leonard's former head coach, Mike Elko. Like, there's going to be a lot of emotion on this one. It's going to be a crazy environment, ton of pressure. You're in year 3. You're in year 3. This is the kind of game that you have to have. I think the offense is the difference. I think that what they have at the skill players with Jeremiah Love is the difference, and I think they're ultimately too potent for A&M on that day, and they win that game. You beat NIU. You go to Purdue. You beat Purdue. You beat Miami of Ohio. You play Louisville. Now, Louisville has to come to South Bend this year. We all remember that game last year where Notre Dame went to Louisville. Jack Harlow's in the crowd. The place was going crazy. I mean, that stadium was absolutely on fire, and they beat Notre Dame. This is a game now, I believe, for Notre Dame, they will have circled in red ink. Marcus Freeman will make sure they go out and get this one. I think that Notre Dame's crowd will be electric as well for this one. So I think Notre Dame wins that game, and they keep a good thing going. They stay undefeated. Then you play Stanford. Stanford could, I'll just say this. Stanford could be sneaky. You never know with Stanford what they're going to be. But I think you beat them. You go to Georgia Tech now. And this game is going to be played in the Benz. This will be, I expect Georgia Tech to be sneaky. Like I just said, Stanford is one to just maybe keep an eye on. I don't think that there's anything to worry about with Stanford there, so don't hear me incorrectly. Georgia Tech could find themselves being a little bit of trouble for you. All right, Haynes King, mobile quarterback. That's always something to deal with. I think you beat Georgia Tech. That's one, though, where if I'm Notre Dame, it's like, hey, lock the heck in. We need everybody on the same page, and we need to be locked in for this one, because if we don't bring our best game, this is a team now that is well coached enough and has enough talent to where they could beat us. They could make that happen. I don't think it will, but I think that's a possibility. So you beat Georgia Tech in Atlanta. You play Navy at MetLife. That'll be fun. Triple option. You never exactly know what you're getting there, but I think they should beat them. You play Florida State. And this is a game where I think it'll be back and forth. To me, I just think that the Florida State defense is going to be so good, especially at this point in the year. I think they're going to be team speed-wise a little bit more than what you're able to deal with on that day. I think that they end up beating Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame has their first drop of the season against Florida State. Now, you beat Virginia. You beat Army at Yankee Stadium. You go to USC. Now, USC, it doesn't matter who the head coach is, but when you go to the Coliseum, it's not always the most treacherous place to play, but there's always one game a year where USC just kind of digs deep and wins a game that maybe on paper they weren't supposed to. Notre Dame fans are going to absolutely hate this, and I apologize that you hate this, but I don't apologize for our pick. I think that USC actually beats Notre Dame in the Coliseum to give Notre Dame a record of 10-2. However, 10-2 now for Notre Dame, you're not playing in the conference title game. I think that puts Notre Dame in the college football playoff. Now, what seed do you get remains to be seen, but you use that bye week and you punch yourself a ticket to the dance. And when you get there, if that offense is able to be clicking at that point in time, if Riley Leonard is all the way up to speed, you get healthy, defense, you get in your bag of tricks for that playoff run, and we'll see what Notre Dame is. But overall, I think 10-2 and a playoff berth, that to me is enough to check the box. At that point, I'm like, okay, everything that we've done here for Marcus Freeman, all the moves we've made, we didn't necessarily have to push the envelope. We didn't have to challenge everything, but we did. We didn't have to go get Riley Leonard to be our quarterback. We had guys on this depth chart that we probably could have asked to step in and do a good job for us, but we did. We did go get a quarterback. We did get a new OC. We did get more talent on the perimeter. We did change our philosophy. All those things, I think, paid dividends this year, and Notre Dame ends up being a playoff team for you. So that's our take on Notre Dame, and curious to hear your thoughts when it comes to their overall record prediction in 2024. All right. So let's get right to it, man. I want to tell y'all that the hard count is brought to you by our friends over at Rhoback. Now, you guys that watch this show, you guys know that I love Rhoback, wear them all the time for a reason, and they have the best polos, the best hoodies, the best shirts on the market. If you need a polo to last you the entire day on a hot summer day, Rhoback is your answer. Moisture wicking technology and a 4-way stretch to make it easy to move in while keeping you feeling fresh. Rhoback's everyday shorts are the perfect pairing as well. They're comfortable, have an elastic waistband, and they're great fabric that is made to stress. Now, they've also released a ton of other new products between the most comfortable t-shirts, the bathing suits, whatever you need, Rhoback has got you covered here as we're running through the tape on some warm weather. Rhoback also been proudly leading the NIL charge. They've signed partnerships with guys like Jalen Milroe, Cade Klubnik, as well as others. They are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. So use code JD, just those 2 letters, no periods, just JD on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers. That's spelled RHOBACK. That's 20% off on all performance polos, shorts, and more with code JD. So we appreciate them for making that happen for us. Now, we also got Game Time, Nick. So we're going to make sure we shout out our good friends over at Game Time for making this show happen. The Hard Count brought to y'all by Game Time. Now, Game Time is the best place to make sure you are getting the tickets that you need for college football season. And we've all had this happen before, right? You sit down, you're excited for the game, you find your seat, you sit down, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting behind the Jumbotron. I'm sitting behind this iron pole. With Game Time, that will not happen. That will not happen with Game Time because when you use Game Time, you're going to have the opportunity to see from behind or see from your seat rather, before you even get to the game. Like the virtual view, absolutely massive. Also, Game Time guarantee means that you are getting the best tickets at the best price, the best deal. The reason why, if you find a ticket in the same section and row for less than what you paid, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. All right? So, to maximize Game Time, what you're going to do is download the Game Time app, create an account. I want you to use code HARDCOUNT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Now, again, use code HARDCOUNT. Terms apply. Use the app, HARDCOUNT, $20 off your first purchase. Game Time. Best tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. Hey, we appreciate y'all being dialed in for this show, man. We appreciate y'all making this show what it is. Y'all, we're right there, man. We are right there. This time next week, it's game week. Got Florida State and Georgia Tech on deck. In Ireland, of all places. Man, this is the time of year. Again, set expectations for your family and friends. I'm about to jump into this part of the year where I am booked on Saturdays. That's okay. Also, make sure we're getting a rep during week 0. Whatever the routine is in the morning, dial that in. Tinker with it week 0, that's fine. But week 1, can't change anything. Week 1, we're full go. Hey, appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Nick Brake producing the show. Y'all making this thing happen. Myself, JD Piquel. We're going to keep this party rolling. And we will see y'all next time.